Thank you very much, Carlos, for a very kind introduction. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to give this lecture. I guess I don't need to be here. So the topic I chose has been of interest to me for a long time, since I am from Chile, and Chile has had many, many earthquakes throughout history. So let me tell you about the problem first. This doesn't work. So the motivation of the problem I want to study arises in global seismology. So the inverse problem is, can you determine the inner structure of the Earth by measuring the travel times of waves, seismic waves that go through the Earth? This is a picture of a Mongolia earthquake in 1980. It was 7.5 in the Richter scale. So the seismic waves are very strong, and some of them penetrate deeply into the Earth, in particular the inner core and so on. And what you measure is the travel times of waves measured at different seismic stations around the Earth. As I said, I come from Chile, and Chile has a long record of earthquakes. I produce a lot of data for geophysicists. In particular, the largest earthquake ever recorded was in the south of Chile near Valdivia. It was 9.5 in the Richter scale. Of course, earthquakes produce a lot of destruction and loss of life and so on. However, they give information. And so we want to use that information so that one day we can be able to predict earthquakes with sufficiently advance notice. Okay, so this is the main motivation of the problem and has been studied for a long time. And I'm going to talk about the mathematics of this problem. Somehow it doesn't work very well. Okay, this is This is a cartoon of one of the largest tsunamis ever recorded also. The earthquake was in 1960 in the south of Chile near Valdivia, as I mentioned before. And of course, the tsunami produced earthquakes throughout the Pacific, particularly in Japan. In another completely different scale, and for different frequencies of the waves, this problem also arises in medical imaging. I call it human body seismology. So this is a cartoon again. So what you have here is a transmitter of sound waves that penetrate a very high frequency. This is a receiver of the sound waves. You move. I knew that this would happen. And you move the transmitter around and the receiver around, and from the information, of the travel time that takes between transmitter and receiver, so then you would like to recover the inner structure here. In particular, you want to recover the index of refraction or the sound speed of the medium. And the propagation is most of the energy is along certain curves here that will be very important. I call them gamma here. and there will be geodesics of some Riemannian metric. So the total time in this particular case is the index of refraction, which is essentially 1 over the sound speed of the medium and integrated along arc lengths of this curve. And this indicates the difficulty of the problem because the curve depends on the sound speed. So this is a highly nonlinear problem. You want to recover this function, the sound speed, from the travel time. Okay, this problem arises also in optics and oceanography and many other fields. The case of reflections, this is the case I considered before, are the transmitted wave, also arises in many applications. In reflection tomography, you measure the travel time of reflected waves. Suppose you have several scattering points in the medium, like here. Then you measure the travel time of these reflected waves. Or in the case you have an obstacle here, there are some reflected waves. This is reflecting, satisfying the Snell's law, or they are transmitted. And again, the problem is to recover the medium inside for information obtained just at the boundary of the medium, the travel time. So the case of reflection tomography arises in oil exploration, for instance. So here, most of the oil exploration is done in the ocean. Here is a ship, and it has a long tail. You send explosions of sound, so there are some sound guns here, and you measure them on the same tail of the ship with hydrophones. And again, from the travel time, you want to recover the structure here, which can be extremely complicated. And in medical imaging, this reflection tomography arises in ultrasound or echography. You send sound waves, again, of very high frequency, but the frequencies are very different than in the case of oil exploration. And again, from the echoes, from the reflections, you try to create an image of what is inside. And this is a practice that's done all the time for pregnant women to see how the infant is doing. Okay, so let me try to formulate the problem more precisely. Again, the motivation is determining the inner structure of the Earth, measuring travel times of seismic waves. And these are the curves of propagation. Most of the energy is concentrated on certain curves. And this problem was considered in the earlier part of the 20th century by Herglotz, mathematician, and Wicker and Sovritz, geophysicist. And they assume, and these were the first models of the Earth, that the sound speed depends only on the radius. And this very strange condition that the radius over the sound speed is an increasing function. This has the effect of avoiding regions of low velocity inside the Earth. And then you measure the travel time again. So as I said before, this is the integral over the curve of the index of refraction measured against arc lengths. But what are these curves of propagation? And the description of the curves of propagation are based on the ray theory of light, which is also applied to sound, and in optics in general, is the ray theory of light of Fermat's principle. Here is the index of refraction of a medium is very low to very high, and the rays of light try to go in the minimum amount of time possible from point A to point B. That's the Fermat theory, that light takes the shortest optical path from A to B. And since the medium is not uniform, in the case that it will be uniform, then it will be a straight line going from A to B. And so these curves are going to be the geodesics. You try to minimize length, and the length is related to the index of refraction. So the curves are geodesics of a metric. What is the metric in the case of Herglotz and Wicker and Sovritz? It's just a multiple, conformal multiple of the standard Euclidean metric. If C is equal to 1, This is the standard metric, and the geodesics are the straight lines. But of course, this model of the Earth is not really satisfied that the sound speed depends only on the radius. It was a good model initially. One can consider more generally when the sound speed changes with position here. So the length is proportional to the Euclidean length by a factor that corresponds to the sound speed. So the higher the speed, the smaller the length. And so the velocity is independent of direction. For every direction is the same, c of x, and this is considered to be an isotropic median. It's called an isotropic median. But the Earth is very anisotropic. Crystals in general very anisotropic. Even the inner core of the Earth has been shown to be anisotropic. The velocity depends on direction. So the direction of fastest propagation in the case of the Earth is the direction of rotation, of the axis of rotation of the Earth. So this is modeled by a Riemannian metric. So the index of refraction, or the velocity, depends on position, x, and also direction. And so this is a positive definite symmetric matrix. So the length is different, is measured differently in different directions. In this particular case, the length is measured the same in every possible direction. And the velocity in this case is the square root of the length of the vector in this metric, which is given by this. This is going to be happening again and again and again, because my fingers are too large for this. I prefer to move the keys in the computer. So this is the length of the vector c in the metric g. G upper ij is the inverse of the metric g. So the sound speed is the inverse. It's like in this case, you take the inverse of this and take the square root. It's the same thing. But the velocity now depends on direction. For every direction, you have a different velocity. Okay, so how do we measure the travel time? And this is encoded in what's called the boundary distance function. And you can have a more general setup for the people familiar with Riemannian geometry. If you are not, you just consider a domain in Euclidean space with a positive definite symmetric matrix, or a Riemannian manifold with boundary. And the distance function between 2 points in the boundary is the infimum of the length of all the curves joining these 2 points. So this is a Fermat's principle. You try to go from point X to point Y in the minimum amount of time possible. That means the length has to be minimized. And so the length of the curve is given in terms of this positive definite matrix by the length, the superposition of the length of the tangent vector, which is given by this expression. And the inverse problem, now we formulate the travel time tomography problem. Can we recover the metric inside this matrix, which corresponds to the sound speed or the index of refraction, by measuring the distance function between 2 boundary points? So from information on the boundary only, can you recover what is inside? So this is a typical type of inverse problems, and this is the global seismology problem. And in differential geometry, this is called the boundary rigidity problem, although it has been around in geophysics for much longer than that. So the question is, can you recover from the distance function this matrix, G, or a Riemannian metric G? And the answer is no. And a geometry will tell you immediately, because you have an isometry that preserves length, and so you won't be able to see it from the boundary distance function. So you have a change of variables, which is the identity at the boundary, so it does not change the point X and Y. You take what's called the pullback of the metric G, it gives you the same distance as the metric G. So what is the pullback? It's in terms of matrices. Remember, this is a matrix. Is the composition of the Jacobian of this map composed with the metric, composed with the transpose. And the length is given here. I already indicated before is the superposition of the lengths of the tangent vector. And you see this very easily because you change variables here. I mean, you take your new curve, the old curve by the change, composed with the change of variables. The points x and y don't change because this change of variables is identity at the boundary. The length is exactly the same. It's just the chain rule. You just do the chain rule, and then you get a new metric that gives you the same information. So new index of refraction. So there is no uniqueness in this problem. And the question is this the only obstruction to uniqueness? And if we will know that, I mean, that's the only possibility for non-uniqueness of this problem. If we will know that, then that should be sufficient, because in the case of the Earth, for instance, we know an a priori information about the index of refraction. We know a lot about it. And so we should be able to fix this change of variables. Another motivation for this problem comes not from geophysics or medical imaging, from string theory, from holography. For instance, we are in a three-dimensional world. You have what's called the bulk with a metric here. Can you represent all the information on the three-dimensional world in 2 dimensions? And here, in this case, we're measuring the boundary distance function at the boundary. Can you recover what is inside? So is the world an hologram? And if you are interested in this problem, there is a very nice paper with this motivation by 2 physicists. Okay, so before I describe more what are the results about this problem, let me give you a definition. So a manifold or a domain with a matrix is called boundary rigid. You have another metric that has the same distance function. Then there is a change of variable, which is the identity at the boundary, so that one metric is the pullback of the other. What we have learned is that there are many examples of manifolds which are not boundary rigid, because so you will need some a priori condition for the manifold to be boundary rigid. And these obstructions come from the following. So here, we know this already. Is that the only obstruction? And unfortunately, the answer is no either. And this comes to the condition imposed by Herglocks and Wicker and Sofrets, that there are no regions of low velocity inside the Earth. If you have a point inside the manifold, and the metric at the point x0, the metric is very large. That means the velocity is very small. Remember, the velocity is the inverse of the square root of the metric. Then the curves joining points of the boundary are going to try to avoid completely the region around x0, because it will take too much length to go around the point x0. So you cannot see anything that's happening around x0. And another example, I always like to put the South Pole up, since I come from the Southern Hemisphere. Here there are many people from the Southern Hemisphere, so I don't need to motivate that. If you change a little bit the metric in the South Pole, you increase the metric near the South Pole, to go from a point X to Y along the equator, you're not going to go along the geodesics through the South Pole. You're going to go along the equator, because it takes much less length. So therefore, you cannot see anything that's happening near the South Pole from just measuring the distance function, because the distance function measures the first arrival times of waves, the minimum length of all the curves joining the 2 points. So this is again the definition of boundary rigid, and what we have learned is you need some a priori condition, and one such condition is called simplicity. So a manifold is called simple if given 2 points in the boundary, there is a unique minimizing geodesic joint in them. That means that the geodesic not only minimize distance locally, geodesics are defined by minimizing length locally you go from a point X to a close point Y, but to be simple, you need that the minimize length globally, and also that the boundary is strictly convex. So given 2 points in the boundary, there is a unique geodesic joint in them. And the conjecture is if the manifold is simple, then it's boundary rigid. So the only obstruction in that case should be this diffeomorphism invariance. So there is a change of variables, which is the identity of the boundary, that will give you a new metric that has the same distance function. So let me tell you what was known. Before I do that, let me say that the Herglos condition, was that the radius over the sound speed is an increasing function of the radius. It's not necessarily simple. So this is a metric satisfying the Herglos condition. These were built by Francois Monard, a postdoc of mine. And you take this radial metric, which is indicated there. This is not working, so that's why and it depends radially on a parameter k and a parameter sigma. So sigma, you fix sigma. For different values of the parameter, is either simple for k.2, is simple, and you see that the behavior of the geodesics is very nice, starting from the point which is in red. Very nice behavior of the geodesic. When k is equal to 0.49, it's not simple anymore, because there is not a unique geodesic joint in the points in the boundary. You have what's called conjugate points of the metric, or caustics in geophysics. And the caustic is, in this case, is at the boundary, or you can have a conjugate points that are not joined by unique geodesic inside. This is the third picture when k is equal to 1.23. So the Herglos condition is not the same as being simple. And we're going to try to generalize the Herglos condition later to higher dimensions. Okay. So what are the known results about this conjecture? So the conjecture is the manifold is simple, then you can recover the metric up to this change of variables. Yes. So Michel, who proposed this problem in differential geometry literature, although this was known for a long time in the geophysics literature, showed that compact subdomains of Euclidean space or the parabolic plane or the open round hemisphere are boundary rigid. Gromov extended Michel's result to any compact subdomain of Euclidean space. That means you have the Euclidean metric. And Besson and Courtois and Gallot have a nice paper about some negatively curved symmetric spaces. All the examples have a constant curvature. The first result for non-constant curvature, which was by Stefanov myself, when the two metrics are close to the Euclidean metric, then the conjecture is true. This was extended by Lassa, Sharafuddinov, and myself to the case where one metric is arbitrary, but the other is close to the Euclidean metric. And Burago and Ivanov improved the regularity that we assume for that result. In dimension 2, more is known. Otal and Kroc proved that in the Gaussian, the case that the Gaussian curvature is negative, then it's true. Boundary rigidity is true. In that case, the behavior of the geodesics is very nice. And with Pestov, we proved that any two-dimensional manifold which is simple and is boundary rigid. So in this case, this conjecture is solved completely, that the distance function determines the metric up to the natural obstruction for surfaces, for simple surfaces. In higher dimensions, the problem is still open. This is an interesting problem, and with Stefano we proved that generically it's true. So there is an open and dense set of metrics, a generic set in some topology, that if you take two metrics close to that, and then there is a diffeomorphism, sorry, two metrics with distance function is the same, then there is a change of variables, and one is the pullback of the other. So it's true for an open and dense set, generically. But we don't know that whether it is true for all metrics. And this set L contains all the simple and real analytic metrics. I knew that this wouldn't be a good idea, but anyway. Okay, so this is a summary of what's called the boundary rigidity problem. But the difficulty is that you are only measuring the first arrival times of waves. You are missing a lot of information. Remember when the metric was very large at a point, you cannot recover anything about what's happening near that point. So what we want to do is follow all the geodesics. So it's better for that to look at geodesics in phase space. For every point and a direction, there is a unique geodesic going through that point with the given direction. So you take the Hamiltonian given by this symmetric positive definite matrix, which is given there, the function hg of xc. And then you define the bicharacteristic curves, which are the integral curves of the Hamiltonian vector field. The Hamiltonian vector field is the derivative of the Hamiltonian with respect to c, and then the minus the derivative of the Hamiltonian with respect to x. This is Hamilton-Jacobi theory. This is the way that Hamilton looked at geodesics. He didn't take the second order differential equation or try to minimize the lengths of geodesics. Look at this point of view. This is very useful. You have a point and a direction, initial point and initial direction, which has length 1. And the geodesics are simply, you are looking at phase space, you look down, are the projections of these curves in x space. And now you define, instead of the distance function, what's called the scattering relation. So you take a point and a direction. You take the bicharacteristic curve that goes through that point in that direction that goes inside the domain, and assume that it exits. It may be trapping. You may have trapping that the geodesic stays around forever. But let's assume it's non-trapping. Otherwise, you don't get any information. And then you map it to the final point and the final direction. And this is called the scattering relation. It comes from scattering theory. So the problem is if we know the direction and point of entrance of the geodesic, then we know, if we know the direction and point of exit, can we recover the metric inside? Can we recover the index of refraction inside? So we are following now all the geodesics, not just the ones who minimize lengths globally. And the conjecture is that if the manifold is non-trapping, then the scattering relation determines the metric up to the natural obstruction. And this is a generalization of the boundary rigidity problem, because if the manifold is simple, then the scattering relation gives you exactly the same information. There is no new information there. And so this is the right problem to consider. Can you recover a metric? It's a very nice geometric problem for the young people here. They have a lot of energy, and they're not afraid of the problems. Very little is known about that problem. From the scattering relation, can you recover the metric inside? And what we proved with Pestov is actually we found a connection between the scattering relation and the Dirichlet to Neumann map, which is some other object which I'm not going to get into now. Okay? And if you add the travel time, that's called the length rigidity problem. Unfortunately, there is a lot of notation here. Again, you take a point and direction of entrance of the geodesic, the point of exit, direction of exit, and now you take the length of that geodesic as well. can you recover the metric from that information? It's not clear that we really need the travel time there, but let's assume it for simplicity. And then, as I pointed out before, is the length rigidity problem is the analog of the boundary rigidity problem. It's the right analog of the boundary rigidity problem for non-simple metric. The condition of being simple is very restrictive, and it's certainly not satisfied in the Earth. There are always caustics, there is always conjugate points and things like that. So there are several results that I point out here, but let me point out one that is related to the Herglos and Wicker and Soffre condition. So in order to get a global result, I'm going to consider a problem which has of interest in its own, which is called the partial data problem. In general, for instance, in the Earth, you don't have information everywhere about the distance function. I was assuming before, given 2 points on the boundary, you know the travel time, the distance function between those points. But suppose we know it only near a point, which is more realistic. Can we recover the metric near that point? So this is the local problem. And we're going to solve the global problem by first solving the local problem near the boundary and then marching in, going inside the manifold. And the result we just proved with Plamen, Stefanov, and Andras Vashi is that in dimensions 3 or higher, if you have that the manifold is strictly convex. I don't know why it doesn't work. I want to go back, but I cannot go back. Can I have another one? Oh, there it is. The point P here is assumed to be strictly convex to make sure that the geodesics joining these points near the boundary stay inside. Well, I cannot move now. ¿Ah? Ok, así es, ya, eso es mejor, ¿no? Eso es mejor. Yo le digo cuando me lo avance, ¿no? Es más fácil. Ok, adelante. Entonces, no, atrás, por favor. El teorema es que si tenemos en dimensión 3 o más alta, si tenemos si la frontera es estrictamente convexa cerca del point P. Sorry. If the dimension is bigger or equal than 3, this happens when you get old, you get senile. And the boundary is strictly convex near the point P, and the distance function is the same. Here, the distance function of the scattering relation is the same information because given 2 points that is local is always a unique geodesic joining the points. So the local problem is the same for the scattering relation or for the distance function. Then we can recover the metric near the point P. Not only that, it's not just a uniqueness result. This is always up to this change of variables, which is the identity at the boundary where you have the information. We also have a stability. That means we get a stable method, and also it's a reconstructive method. We can find the metric given this boundary distance function. And if I have time at the end, I will show you some numerical results. And the only result that was known before about this was for real analytic metrics. So this solved completely the boundary rigidity or the length rigidity problem locally. And then what result can we get globally? This is only near the boundary. What result can we get globally? Cambiar? Is the following. in order to be able to march in, so we have the information everywhere now near the boundary. We can march in a little bit using the previous result. We measure the distance function, given 2 points in the boundary, we can get the metric locally near the boundary in the color neighborhood of the boundary. Can we continue marching in, continue going on? And the answer is yes, if you have one strictly convex point. So it was very crucial that the point P that I had previously is a strictly convex point, so that the geodesics that join the points nearby stay inside. So how do we ensure that there is such a thing? There is at least one point near the boundary which will be strictly convex. So in order to do this, we assume this condition we call the foliation condition, that the manifold is foliated by strictly convex upper surfaces. So given any point, there is a strictly convex surface there that goes through it. This may be too strong, but in this way we can assure that we can continue marching inside. And we do this up to a nowhere dense set. No, go forward. Okay, in the isotropic case, it's even to explain the result in the isotropic case. Remember, the isotropic case means you just have a multiple of the Euclidean metric, the identity metric. And in this case, there is no diffeomorphism invariance because you have a diffeomorphism exchange of variables will change an isotropic to anisotropic. So in that case, you can expect uniqueness, and what we have proven is indeed that's the case under the foliation condition. So for the partial data case, is if you know the distance function for this case near points, for points near P in the boundary, you can recover uniquely and also reconstructively and stable the sound speed near the point P. And the global result in dimensions 3 or higher, if the boundary is strictly convex and the distance functions in the same, this is again near the point P. Okay, and then under the foliation condition, we have the length rigidity problem. If we have that the scattering relation is the same, and the length is the same, that's the length data, then the sound speeds are the same in the whole manifold, and you also have stability and reconstruction. So the foliation condition allows for conjugate points. So when there are caustics on the metric, or even trap geodesics, for instance, the case is a tubal neighborhood of a periodic geodesic, which is trap, and manifold without focal points for the people who know this. But there are many examples of metrics satisfying the foliation condition. For instance, any strictly convex, non-negative curvature manifold satisfies the foliation condition. And I want to emphasize this fact: the foliation condition is the analog of the Herglocks and Wicker and Sophie's condition for non-radial speeds. So I remember that the condition by Herglocks and Wicker and Sophie's, what I described at the very beginning, is this, that the radius over the sound speed is an increasing function to avoid regions of low velocity. And then they had, Wicker and Sophie's had uniqueness and reconstruction, and in fact the formula that is taught in any global seismology course is a formula, concrete formula in one dimension, that you can recover the sound speed from the travel times. And then one can check directly that this condition is equivalent to the fact that the standard spheres for the Euclidean metric, which of course are strictly convex, are also strictly convex for these metrics, for the metric 1 over c squared times dx squared. So the Herglocks and Wicker and Sophie condition is not a mysterious condition, it's a geometric condition that guarantees that the balls are strictly convex with respect to that metric. So what I want to emphasize again is that the foliation condition, which is valid not only for radial speed, is the natural analog of the Hercules and Wickeren surface condition. So to finish, I will jump over a lot of pages. So let me stay with this page. Let me remind you that the Hercules condition that satisfies the foliation condition includes non-simple metrics. For example, the second case when k is 0.49, and the third case when k is 1.23. Okay. And I will going to describe some ideas about the proof, but I certainly don't have time. But let me describe one result about the reflection tomography problem. For reflection, the situation is much better. So I need to jump over a lot of pages. And so it's working. I hope it works now. Is the travel time reflection problem. Suppose instead of measuring the transmission data, you have a lot of scattering points in the medium. This is an assumption, so there are a lot of reflections. So there are a lot of discontinuities in the medium, and that's a reasonable assumption for a lot of medium. So instead of measuring the travel time of the transmitted waves, you measure the travel time of the reflected waves. So this is the broken scattering relation. You take a point and direction, you measure the travel time of the once broken rays. And in this case, if you know the boundary and you know this broken scattering relation, so this point and the direction, the point of exit and direction of exit of the broken geodesic and the travel time, then you can recover the metric uniquely. And it's also reconstruction and stability for this problem. So this is reflection problem is a much better problem, but again, you have to assume that there are a lot of points inside which are give you this reflection, a lot of scattering points, a lot of discontinuities in the medium. So we have done several numerical methods related to this problem. Again, this is called in numerical analysis a layer stripping type of algorithm. You find the metric is near the boundary and then you march in. That's what we did. We solved the problem locally near the boundary. We march in. So this is an example with no broken geodesics. The one on the right is the error that you're doing, so it's a pretty good reconstruction. You can, we did apply it also to the case of I should go one before. This is a convex obstacle. You can recover not only the sound speed, but you can recover the obstacle, a convex obstacle. And in the case of a concave obstacle, we can recover the sound speed outside. And you want to recover both the sound speed and the obstacle, then you get only the convex hull of the obstacle and the sound speed outside. And this is the error on the right that you have. And again, you have this situation of non-strictly convex. You can recover the convex hull of the obstacle and the sound speed outside. And this is the error. And a benchmark in geophysics is the Marmousi model, which is a very complicated sound speed. It certainly has cost a lot of caustics and a lot of complications, trap rays, and so on. And you want to try your numerical method, you want to try it against this, for this model. And with just measuring travel times, you're not measuring the waves themselves, you get a relative error of 2.24%, which is very good. Yes, thank you very much.